Hi guys, I'm back. Here's my hair in all of its glory. I hacked it all off. Again, oh gosh, I could not stand the other cut. It was like a shag and it just was not me. So, either way, I'm on here doing a bulk video recording to prepare for, I have a hernia surgery scheduled for Monday. So I expect that I'm not going to be interested in doing anything for 6 weeks. So I'm making sure you guys are taken care of in the meantime. So I'm going to go through, this is going to be my year-end market breakdown video. I sell my patterns. I have 59 designs available now on my Ravelry store. I have some of those available through Etsy, which I need to transfer more over. But, so between those, I make pattern sales on Etsy, I make pattern sales on Ravelry, and then I make money from craft shows and markets all year long. Last year I really hustled and did a bunch of shows. Some of them were worth it, some of them were not. And I have everything broken down. So I'm going to go through all of that, and we're going to see what did I make through my business, gross and net, by the end of the year. Stick with me, guys. So because it's lower, let's start with Etsy. In January, I had $94.62 worth of pattern sales. There was some tax and VAT with that, some fees, some marketing. So my net total for January was $72.14. For February, my gross was $158.74. And after tax, fees, and marketing, it was $117.91. In March, I had $23.02 in gross, and that became $18.28 in net. In April, I had $36.10 in gross, and then had $21.88 in net. In May, I had $53.50 in gross sales, which became $38.29 in net sales. In June, I had $48.87 in sales, which became $38.77 in net. In July, I only had $10.10 in sales, which is sad because that's my birthday month. And that became $8.05 in net sales. In August, there were $26.75 in pattern sales, which became $17.08. Then in September, I had $31.96 in gross, which became $22.48 in net. October, I had $80.13 in sales, which ended up becoming $49.99 in net sales. There were really high fees that month. I'm not really sure why. In November, I had $25.50 in sales, which became $18.83 in net. And then finally in December, I had $10.60 in gross sales, which became $5.30 in net. So some months are better than others when it comes to the ratio. I do mark my patterns up on Etsy compared to on Ravelry just to cover some of those fees and stuff. But sometimes it's as low as 50 cents or 50% of the money that I sell my stuff for that I actually get in return, which is really high fees. Etsy is expensive. Yeah, there's a lot of makers who've left Etsy over the last 5 years because of how high the fees have gotten, and I don't necessarily blame them. If I was selling physical items, I probably would too, because you have to add shipping and there's a lot higher fees because of all that. But thankfully these are just PDF files, so it's kind of like, what's that called? Where you make money but you're not really trying to. I forget the term of it. Okay. So to break it down, I made a total of $594.20 in pattern sales just through Etsy over this last year in gross sales, which broke down to $429 in net sales. So at the end of all that, Etsy took 28%, almost a third from every sale on average, which is a little frustrating. It's like, that's mine. And I'm just noting that down. So, like I said, my net sales from Etsy were $429. And because my gross sales were less than $600, they are not reporting my sales to the IRS. As far as, that's how my general understanding is. Now, granted, I report all of my digital sales just because of the fact that, well, you can keep track of those really easy. So I'm not going to be caught with my foot in my mouth. So then we move on to Ravelry. And Ravelry was not terrible. I did make more on Ravelry on the regular than I did on Etsy this year. So in January, I did, and so the sale that I'm doing right now, which we're in the middle of January for me, I did last year, where you could buy, my toddler's in the background trying to interrupt me. Okay, so last year I did the same pattern sale where you could buy every single pattern in my shop for a total of $15, and 100% of the money raised from those pattern sales went to my grandmother, who on January 2nd last year lost her husband, my grandfather, to just completely unexpectedly. We believe that he had a heart attack, and he was, I believe, only 52 years old. He's not my biological grandfather, but he has been my grandfather since I was born. It was a horrible loss. This is my cat, by the way. His name is Simba. With my grandmother losing her husband, she almost had a heart attack herself, actually. The stress of it, she's had health issues for quite some time. She ended up with COVID, which it was pretty bad. She didn't almost die from COVID, but it really made things awful for her. She needed oxygen and stuff like that. So she ended up with a heart episode. It ended up being broken heart syndrome. Thank goodness she was able to recover from that. So she was able to recover from that. But, my grandpa was barely over 50. He wasn't expecting to die anytime soon. They didn't have life insurance or anything for him. So she had to pull money out of the proverbial sky to pay for that. And so I decided to run a pattern sale to donate the proceeds to my grandma to help bury my grandpa. So the pattern sale that I ran last year, all 50 plus patterns that I had at the time for $15. If I remember correctly, I sold 77 copies of that. So I made a little over $1,000 to donate to my grandma for my grandpa's funeral, and that covered about half of it. So, I am so appreciative of anyone who bought my patterns to support that. Now I'm running the same sale actually to raise money for... I'm very thankful for any of you who watch this channel who bought those patterns before. The sale that I'm running for this year, it's a similar purpose. Nobody died, thank goodness, but I'm trying to raise money so that way I am bringing something in while I'm off of work for 6 weeks. We have a house that we need to sell.
Mom.
If I happen to look annoyed by now, it's because I'm trying to do this around my child, who literally won't stop talking when I say the same sentence 30 times. So I'm trying to raise money for my family right now, as I will be off of work for the next 6 weeks. for hernia repair surgery. You know, I have bills that still come whether I work or not, and they need paid for. So if anyone would like to, or if anyone, I guess in this case it'll be past tense, if anyone purchases my pattern sale, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, everything that you guys do. So to jump into this, on Ravelry in January, I had $1,217 in pattern sales. Now, there's change amounts on all of these. I'm not going to add them. I'm just going to round up at the end. So $1,000 of that was a donation to my grandma. Thankfully, it was through GoFundMe, so there should be a receipt. So that is supposed to be a tax write-off. But that being said, I mean, that's $1,200 in gross pattern sales. Then there were $47 in fees that I had to pay. So in February, there were $40 in pattern sales and $1 in fees. In March, there were $85 in pattern sales and $3 in fees. April, there were $57 in sales and $2 in fees. May, we had $85 in sales and $3 in fees. In June, we had $61 in sales and $3 in fees. In July, there were $29 in sales and $2 in fees. August, $31 in sales, $1 in fees. September, $63 in sales, $2 in fees. In October, there were $14 in sales, and because it was so low, there were no fees to pay. In November, we had $35 in sales and $1 in fees. And in December, we had $28 in sales and no fees. I'm not really sure why there were none, but I'm just going to say thank you to Ravelry. So in total, we sold $1,755.09 in pattern sales. And had $67.92 in fees to pay. So that brings us down to $1,687.17 in pattern sales. And we're going to say minus the $1,000 of that for the donation. So we'll say that my Ravelry pattern sales for my business was $687.17. So then we bring this over to my year total in craft shows, you know, the sales that I made, my expenses that I had, and then my total. I also have marked on how many hours per show, how many, like, what my hourly wage was at each show, and how many miles I spent. So I'm not going to read you the mileage for everyone. I'll tell you the mileage at the end of all of it. And I won't tell you how many hours per show, but I'll tell you the hourly. So, my first show of the year was at the Oaks in Conneaut Lake. I made $90 in sales and had $30 in expenses. So I profited $60. I ended up making $10 per hour at that show. The second show was also at the Oaks in Conneaut Lake. I had $100 in sales, had $50 in expenses, so made $50 profit. So that breaks down to $4.16 an hour. This is absolutely not, like, I would not do that show again specifically. The $10 an hour one also, I make $14 an hour at my day job. I think that under that is not acceptable. Like I was saying, if I'm making under $14 an hour at a show, I don't need to do it again. That's what I make at my day job. So, you know what I mean? I don't need to do it. It's kind of a waste of time. So the next one was at Wilhelm Winery. I made $307 in sales. I had $84 in expenses. So I profited $223. Now that wasn't a bad show, really. It wasn't. I'd have to go back and check to see like what I sold to get to that amount. But I know that other people did not do very well. My mom was very much not impressed with that show, and she packed up and left after the first day. But the second day was better for me. So that show broke down to $15.92 an hour. So just over that threshold. Usually I need like $300 for a weekend to be worth it. So the next one was Duran Down Home Days up in Waterford, PA. I sold $362 in product. I had $113 in expenses. So I profited $249, which breaks down to $13.83 an hour. So a little under for what that show needed to be. It was a 3-day show. There were a lot of hours. I actually, to save myself some gas, I stayed at my in-laws' house in between the days. And this is like my brother-in-law and sister-in-law, so it's just, I don't know. It wasn't a bad show, I guess, but it could have been better. Then we had our local Pride Festival in Meadville, PA. It ended up being cut short because we were supposed to be getting hit by storms, and then we all got tore down, and then the storms missed us, so yay for that. But in those 4.5 hours that we were there, I made $258, and it was free to set up, so there was only $18 in fees. So I profited $240, which breaks down to $53.33 an hour. I will definitely do that again next year to see how that works. I think my most popular, hilarious things that sold at that show were I make little stress boobs. I have a pattern coming out for that you can also turn to keychain. And then I also made little velvet peens with big cute eyeballs, and you can also turn those into keychains, and they were hilarious. So the next one was Waterfire Festival down in Sharon over the summer. This is the first time I've done this one. In that one day, I made $1,000.20. Now, I also sold some of my mom's product, which was only about $100, but still, that's $920 of my own product sold. My expenses were $96, so I profited with mine and her stuff $924, which breaks down to $102.66 per hour. It's amazing. I will do that every year for the rest of my life. Then we have the Sunflower Festival. It was a 2-day show. I made $532 in sales, which was better last year, actually. But this year they literally put another crochet toy maker directly beside me. And when offered for them to move, because I was set up in my spot from the last 2 years, they didn't want to move. And at that point, I couldn't move because of how my setup is. You guys have seen it. I mean, it's awful. I could not pick it all up and move it. So, yeah, I sold $532 worth of product. I had $232 worth of expenses, actually. I don't remember why my expenses were so high with this show, other than the fact that it was quite far away. So I profited $300, and it breaks down to $25 an hour. This is a show that I will keep doing. It's been a great show. I voiced my concerns with the organizer. She was very apologetic. She will not do that again. So then the next show was Wilhelm Winery again. This is in Hadley, PA. Sunflower Festival's down in Grove City, PA. Waterfire's down in Sharon, PA. I don't know if I mentioned that. So this Wilhelm Winery show, it was their Midsummer Fun Festival, something like that. I sold $230 worth of product and had $69 in expenses. So I only profited $161 at this show. Now, I don't know, it wasn't great. So my breakdown ended up only being like, well, and my breakdown seems good. It was $23 an hour. So it's not bad. It's just a hair under the other show, but if I'm making under $200 in the day, over 2 days, actually, it just doesn't seem worth it. Now, I feel like I must have messed something up because I have it written down as 7 hours, but this was definitely a 2-day show, so I bet that that's supposed to say 17 hours, which means that my hourly is all messed up. So forget all that. The next one was at Port Farms up in Waterford, PA. I drove back and forth to this show. It was over 3 days, I believe. I sold $457 in product, which is great. I had $121 in expenses. And so I profited $336, which is not bad. My breakdown ended up being $18.66 per hour. So not terrible. I mean, a little low, could have been higher, but not terrible. The issue I think with that one was that you had to pay almost $20 to get into this show. Not because you were paying that just for a show, but you had access to the entire establishment for that price. And it's part of their flower festival. So like I feel like there are two different categories of customers. You're either coming to go play in the flowers, or you're coming to see the craft show. Or you come and do one and just browse the other, but you're really there for one or the other. And I think that's just way too high to get into a craft show, honestly. So the next one was Waterfire again, their fall show down in Sharon. And I sold $640 worth of product. I love this show. It's a 1-day show. I had $100 in expenses. So I profited $540, which breaks down to $67.50 per hour. I'm thrilled with that. Yes, please, every day. Then we had the Homespun Harvest Festival. It was a 2-day show. This was in Franklin, PA. I sold $374 and had $40 in expenses. So profited $334. Breakdown was $20.87 per hour. Then we have the Apple Fest in Franklin, PA. This is a show that there are up to 300 handmade only vendors. There are local bands that play. There's tons of food. It's a 3-day festival. It literally brings in over 90,000 people over the 3-day weekend in our little tiny town. And I live 15 minutes from there. So, yay for me. So over the 3 days, I sold $1,912 in product. I did have $333 in expenses because the fee's a bit high, but appropriate for the show. So I profited $1,579 at this show, which breaks down to about $68.65 per hour. Can't complain. So then we have the Erie Holiday and Gifts Festival. This clearly was in Erie, Pennsylvania. This was a 2-day show. I sold $1,000.34 at this show. I don't really know where the 34 cents comes from, other than Square, maybe. Then at this show I had $427 in expenses because it was a higher fee and I had to pay for a room for the night and food, and so I ended up profiting $573.34 at this show, which breaks down to $47.75 per hour. Again, can't complain. I was thrilled. I love $1,000 shows. The next one was at Blessed Sacrament, which was a 3-day show. I sold $537 in product. I had $406 in expenses because same thing, it was a high fee. It was a lot of gas. I had to pay for a room. I had to pay for food, all that. So I profited $131. That breaks down to $6.23 per hour. Won't do that again. just based on the numbers, let alone my experience while I was there. Then the next one was at Quantitt Lake Middle School for their PTO. This was a 2-day show. I sold $304 worth of product. I had $90 in expenses. And so I profited $214, which breaks down to $12.58 per hour, which is a bit under my threshold, but Quantitt Lake is my alma mater. It's now middle school, but it was my high school. My picture's on the wall. I love being there. I will likely do this again in hopes that I will do better next time. Then we had the Fire and Ice Festival down in New Brighton, Pennsylvania. I sold $722 worth of product. I had $195 in expenses. So I profited $527, and that breaks down to $43.91 per hour. Yay! And then finally, the last one was a market that I hosted. I don't really set up at markets that I host anymore for all the extra work. I don't usually make much money. But this time I figured, why not? I had a whole bunch of vendors back out. So this was my Christmas market in Cochranton. I sold $173 worth of product. I only had $5 in expenses from the show. And so I profited $168, which breaks down to $18.66 per hour. So I was surprised with that, but I can't complain about it. So my year totals, gross, for craft shows only, was that I sold $9,018 in product in 2023. Now, after my expenses, I had $2,409 in expenses total. So my net profit for craft shows only this year, or this past year, was $6,609. I'm ecstatic about that. That's more than my whole business made last year by like $2,000. So yay for businesses growing and doing better and, pounding the pavement and getting it done and just getting out there. So for my business as a whole, I should mention actually that part of my expenses with that, I did my mileage. I ended up driving 1,586 miles for craft shows alone last year. I get 17 mile an hour mile per gallon with my van. It's a Toyota Sienna, which breaks down to about 93 gallons of gas that I spent. And the average price of gas last year in my area was $3.50. So I spent $327 in gas last year for my markets. So that affects things too. So we're going to do my gross sales first total for my complete business. We had $9,018 in craft show sales, $755 in Ravelry sales, and $594 in Etsy sales. Now remember, this does not include the $1,000 donation to my grandmother. So my total gross sales for last year were $10,368. You know what I meant. After expenses, that becomes $7,398 in net. So I had about $3,000 in expenses, almost. But for my business to profit over $7,000 in a year. Now I do have other expenses I have to take out of that, so that green number will come down a bit. I have to consider my yarn purchases this year, my Microsoft subscription. I had to buy a new iPad and a new computer this year for my business. And so those are all expenses that I had to pay. And there were some, I ended up buying a heated jacket for my craft shows, and electric hand warmers and a neck warmer and stuff like that to do my outside shows and other like craft show setup things. So I do have expenses to take out of it. I really don't expect my expenses to be a whole lot more than another $2,000, so I would still be in the green for more than $5,000. I will come back and update that at some point when I know, when we have to see the tax guy. I'll get there. But I just wanted to share with you guys my excitement. I made $10,000 plus in gross sales this year between my products and my patterns. And if you include the $1,000 I donated to my grandmother, that's over $11,000 in sales. I'm amazed. I get to live my dream. I get to crochet every day that my arm allows me, because if I didn't mention in this video, my arm is down for the count with a crochet injury, so yay me for crocheting too much. Make sure to give yourself breaks, stretch your wrist, do not lean all of your body weight on your elbow, trapping your nerves, because it'll make it so that you can't crochet. So hopefully that clears up soon and I can crochet a lot more, because, I'm itching. I'm itching to crochet. I'm so frustrated that I can't. Anyways, thanks for sticking with me, doing all the math, hearing me out. I'm just so excited, over $10,000 in sales in a year from something that I absolutely love to do. I want to grow it even further. I want to be able to quit my job as a CNA and do this full time. This is what I want to do. This is what I want to spend my time doing, is patterns and craft shows and making money, So if you have any suggestions or questions, please leave them in the comments. Tell me what your favorite part of this video was. And otherwise, I'll see you in the next one, guys. Bye.